When I pulled up to my driveway that evening, something immediately felt off. The lights were on inside, but not my lights. The curtains were different, the welcome mat was gone, and a strange silver SUV was parked right where I always parked my old Toyota. I froze when I saw smoke rising from the backyard grill. A man I'd never seen before flipped burgers like he owned the place. When I tried my key, it didn't fit. My stomach dropped. A woman stepped out from the kitchen and yelled, "Can I help you? This is private property," I stammered. "Ma'am, this is my house." She laughed nervously, holding up a deed. "Not anymore. We bought it last week through your HOA. That's when my world shattered. I had just returned from 3 peaceful weeks in China visiting my mother, and somehow while I was gone, someone sold my home. And the only person who ever had a spare key was Layla Lewis, the HOA president. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And if you've ever dealt with a power-hungry HOA, you might want to subscribe because this one gets wild. The first night I didn't sleep. I sat in a stale motel room off Highway 6 with my suitcase still zipped the TV low enough to pretend it was company and a stack of documents spread across the bed like a paper autopsy. Deed. Mortgage statement. The last 3 years of HOA receipts highlighted in neon yellow. It was absurd. A stranger was flipping burgers in my backyard, and I was the one paying for a room that smelled like old coffee and pine cleaner. The more I stared at the papers, the sharper the memories cut. My war with the HOA hadn't started big. It started with grass, specifically my grass daring to grow half an inch over their posted limit after a week of rain. A $100 fine arrived in my mailbox like a parking ticket from a phantom cop. I measured the lawn with a tape measure and took photos with today's newspaper in frame, like I was documenting a hostage. When I emailed the board, I got a terse reply from our new president, Layla Lewis. All properties must maintain community standards. Non-compliance will result in additional penalties. Community standards. The phrase was a cudgel wrapped in lavender. Layla could weaponize anything: paint swatches, mailbox heights, the placement of solar lights. She ran Willow Creek Estates like a boutique dictatorship, smiling in newsletters, scowling in person, always one citation away from a personal victory. The board clapped on command. Most neighbors kept their heads down. I didn't. It wasn't that I enjoyed conflict. I'm a software engineer. I like tidy logic and predictable outcomes. But nothing about Layla was logical. The approved color palette she brandished at meetings wasn't in the CC&Rs. The sidewalk encroachment she claimed when my truck's bumper kissed the curb by 2 inches was nowhere in the municipal code. I pushed back politely at first, citing clauses, asking for minutes, requesting that fines be rescinded. When polite didn't work, I got meticulous. I kept a binder with tabs, fines photos, correspondence, receipts. I attended every monthly meeting and asked for a line-item budget. I learned how often power depends on other people agreeing not to ask questions. My neighbor Steve, a quiet guy with a softball coach's patience, was the only one who told me I wasn't crazy. He'd seen Layla call a tow truck on a visiting nurse who had parked 2 feet over a white line while helping an elderly resident. He also saw her insist the nurse apologize for disrupting the aesthetics. When I told Steve I'd be gone for 3 weeks in China to visit my mother, her arthritis had flared and she missed me, he immediately offered to keep an eye on the house. "Text me your flight when you land," he said. "I'll bring your mail inside." I texted him the morning I left. "Board knows I'm out through the 14th. Email sent to all of them. You've got the spare key?" He thumbs-upped it. We didn't think twice that the HOA required a duplicate key for emergencies. Willow Creek had always done it. The file photo of Layla's smile under the rule in the welcome packet suddenly felt like a warning I'd failed to read. 2 weeks before my trip, Layla escalated. A certified letter appeared by my door, the kind people use to break up under the supervision of the federal government. "Delinquent HOA assessment," the header shouted. "The number $15,000." I stared at it, then laughed a short, cold sound that wasn't actually funny. I pay my dues the way I pay my electric bill, automatically on the first business day. My bank's ACH record looked like a neat picket fence. I printed it. I printed the receipts from the HOA portal. I stapled them. I brought them to Layla's office. She didn't offer me a seat. Her desk was modern glass. Her smile was older than time. "Clerical error," she said, but her tone told a different story. "Still, Daniel, you've been a bit of a distraction this year. Maybe it's time we got things back on track. By fabricating a debt? By showing good faith?" she said, ignoring my question. "Pay the balance, and we'll of course reconcile. If the system glitched, you'll be reimbursed." I set down the stack of receipts. "The system didn't glitch, and you're not getting a penny." Her eyes flicked to the security camera mounted in the corner. "It's never about money with me," she said, and the way she said me made the room smaller. "It's about standards." Standards were how she ended meetings too. The board nodded when she invoked them like parishioners hearing a prayer. She closed the most recent session by announcing a new initiative for uniform mailbox styles. I asked which clause in the CC&Rs authorized that. She said, "The spirit of the document." I told her spirits don't collect fines. The night before my flight, I sent one last email to the board. I'll be out of the country visiting family from the 24th through the 14th. Any notices can be emailed. Steve next door has a key for emergencies. Please do not enter my home without my written consent. I CC'd myself, printed the sent confirmation, and slid it into my binder. My mother hugged me at the airport in Beijing, her hands small and warm, and reminded me to eat more fruit. I promised I would. I did not know that while we shared hot tea and old photos, someone else was sharing a tour of my kitchen. Back in the motel room, I replayed the moment I had arrived home like a clip I could edit if I found the right keyboard shortcut. The man at my grill, Derek Thompson, it turned out, and his wife Hannah had been surprised but not panicked to see me. They weren't scammers. They were the kind of people who anthropologize new neighborhoods through throw pillows and toddler scooters. They showed me a purchase agreement with my name on it and a closing statement dated exactly 8 days ago. The notary stamp was crisp. The signatures looked like mine if my hand had learned cursive at gunpoint. The price, $385,000, made my heart knock against my ribs. My last appraisal had read $552,000. Who sells a 3-bedroom with a finished basement for 30% under market unless they need cash fast or they're doing someone a favor? When I called the police, 2 officers arrived with the practiced diplomacy of people who know property disputes are mines with badges. They were patient, professional, and completely hamstrung. "Sir, on paper this is a clean transaction," one of them kept saying. "This is a civil matter unless we find clear evidence of fraud." He looked at me not unkindly, as if to say, "You will need a lawyer." He was right. He was also a character in someone else's script because someone had made sure the paperwork sang in key. I thought of Steve then. I called him 3 times before he picked up his voice, a static whisper drowned by airport announcements. "I'm so sorry, man," he said. "I got pulled into a site emergency in Denver. Left the morning after you. I told Layla I'd be back on the 12th. She said the board would keep an eye on things." I sat on the edge of the motel bed, the carpeted universe suddenly tilting. "You told Layla she was at the dog park. She asked if you'd found someone to water your plants." I didn't think. "It's not your fault," I said, and meant it. "Just get back safe." I opened my email. There lined up like dominoes were messages. I hadn't written one from me to a buyer's agent. I'd never met authorizing showings while I was traveling internationally. One from me to a notary named Cheryl, agreeing to remote notarization of a power of attorney. One from me to a banker, confirming wire instructions. The language was me down to the way I hyphenate follow-up, but it wasn't me. Whoever did it had studied my tone like a thief learns a schedule. I drilled down into the metadata. I'm not a forensics expert, but I know how to read headers. The sending IP on 3 of the emails resolved to the same block as the HOA office suite, the one with Layla's frosted glass door and a ceramic bowl of sugar-free candies that taste like rules. I took screenshots, time-stamped them, backed them up to 2 drives. I sent them to myself and printed them because paper is so dumb it's incorruptible. Then I opened the HOA portal. My login worked on the first try. The dues ledger showed a 0 balance. The fines section showed paid in full. The documents section showed a single new file uploaded last week, POA, D. Wong, executed. When I clicked it, a polished PDF unfurled a power of attorney granting Layla Lewis the authority to sell, transfer, and encumber my property. My name was spelled correctly. My driver's license number was correct. My signature almost was. There's a notch in the W of Wong that I make unconsciously. The notch here was too clean like a font, pretending to be handwriting. I felt the world narrow to a tunnel where only 2 names existed, mine and hers. I printed the POA and laid it beside my deed, as if comparison could undo alchemy. I wrote down a list. 1. Call county recorder. 2. Get copy of recorded deed. 3. File police report supplement, reforged POA. 4. Find attorney. 5. Tell mom only the parts that won't make her sicker. Then I added a 6th line and pressed the pen hard enough to tear the paper. Stop, Layla. The next morning I shaved, put on the same blue button-down I'd worn to my last performance review, and drove to the county recorder's office. The clerk was kind in the way people are kind when they've watched this movie before. She pulled up my parcel number and turned the monitor so I could see. There it was, a quitclaim deed recorded 9 days ago, transferring title from Daniel Y. Wong, a single man, to Thompson Family Trust. The grantor's signature matched the forged one in my file. The notary, Cheryl Anders. The mailing address for tax bills had already been updated to the Thompsons' point. "Can I get a certified copy?" I asked. My voice sounded like it had been left in the Sunday, of course, she said. "If you suspect fraud, you'll also want to file an affidavit of identity theft and talk to an attorney who does real estate litigation." "I will," I said. "And one more thing, do you have the IP logs from e-recording?" She didn't, but the title company might. I thanked her anyway. Small kindnesses keep you from unraveling. In the parking lot, my phone buzzed. An email notification from the HOA portal: reminder, community beautification compliance inspection, tomorrow, 9:00 a.m. I laughed, a painful, bright sound in a bland morning. Layla had sold my home out from under me and still had the audacity to schedule an inspection I could not fail because I did not live there. That, more than the forged documents, told me who I was up against. Paperwork could be undone. Arrogance needed spectacle. I pulled up a new message and typed 3 words into the subject line: retaining counsel today. Then I wrote the first sentence of a war I hadn't wanted but would now finish. "Dear Miss Lewis, this is to inform you that any further contact regarding my property must be directed to my attorney." The next morning I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. It was the motel's cheap alarm clock buzzing against the plastic wood, but it felt like the universe shaking me awake. The sender of the new email was short and sharp: Kevin Adams, Esquire, real estate litigation. I had found him the night before through a friend of a friend, a lawyer with a reputation for handling messy property scams. His email was brief: "Mr. Wong, I reviewed your materials. Come by my office today at 10:00 a.m. Bring everything. Do not contact the HOA again." Kevin's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, the kind with creaky floors and too many diplomas on the wall. He looked about my age, mid-40s, but with the calm of someone who'd watched the system eat people alive and learned to feed it back one case at a time. He didn't waste time. "All right, Daniel, walk me through everything you know." I laid it all out: the forged deed, the POA file, the fake emails, the IP addresses. He listened, tapping a pen against a legal pad, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he said quietly, "You're not crazy. You're the victim of a very organized fraud." He pointed at the signature on the fake power of attorney. "This isn't a random forgery. This was done by someone who knows what they're doing, someone with access to property records, notary seals, and time to plan." "You said the HOA president had access to your key, Layla Lewis." I said, the name burning on my tongue. "She's the only one with a duplicate. She's been after me for months. She said I owed $15, 0 inches HOA dues. I proved her wrong." Kevin nodded slowly. "That's motive. And based on what you showed me, she's got opportunity and means too." He printed out the deed record I'd brought and circled 2 names: Layla Lewis, listing agent, and Travis Lewis, buyer's agent, family. Perfect setup. The HOA has its own brokerage license. They've used that loophole before. And she sold your property at a 30% discount. Yeah, to the Thompsons. They thought it was an auction deal. Kevin sighed. "This isn't just HOA abuse. This is felony real estate fraud. We'll go through civil court for the property, but I'll also forward this to the district attorney's real estate crimes division." For the first time in days, I felt a pulse of hope. It was faint, but it was something. We spent the rest of the morning creating a timeline. Kevin was meticulous. Every email, every phone call, every bank transaction had to fit into the puzzle. He explained the hard truth: because the Thompsons were good faith buyers, I couldn't simply walk back into my home and change the locks. The property transfer had to be legally voided, or I could face trespassing charges on my own house. That sentence hit me like a brick. My own house was now considered someone else's property until the system decided otherwise. When I left Kevin's office, the sun felt too bright. I drove back toward Willow Creek Estates, part curiosity, part masochism. The neighborhood looked the same as always: neat hedges, pastel houses, perfectly aligned mailboxes. But the air felt different, heavier. As I turned onto my street, I saw Layla standing on the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, chatting with a resident like nothing had happened. She wore her trademark pink blazer, the color of a smile that hides a knife. I pulled over, rolled down my window, and said evenly, "Enjoying your new commission?" Her head tilted slightly, that same diplomatic smirk plastered across her face. "Daniel, I'd appreciate if you refrained from harassment. You no longer reside here." I clenched the steering wheel. You forged my signature. You broke into my home. You. She raised her hand, interrupting me with a calmness that only made me angrier. You authorized me to handle the sale, Daniel. You don't remember. You sent the power of attorney documents yourself. My voice cracked. I have the metadata, Layla. The emails came from the HOA office. Her eyes flickered for a fraction of a second, the kind of micro-expression you can't fake. Then she recovered. You've always been paranoid. Maybe it's best to focus on moving forward. Mistakes happen. Mistakes, I snapped. You sold my life. But she was already walking away, heels clicking against the concrete like a metronome of arrogance. That night Kevin called. I just pulled the financials. Guess who the escrow company wired the funds to? Let me guess. Layla Close. Willow Realty LLC. Registered owner Layla Lewis. Same business address as the HOA office. I sat there silent. He continued. She's funneling HOA foreclosure money into her own brokerage. I've seen this pattern before. We'll need to subpoena her banking records, but first we'll build pressure. How publicly? The next day, Kevin filed a preliminary fraud complaint with the county and requested an injunction to freeze the property title. It didn't reverse the sale yet, but it put a big red flag on the parcel. Anyone trying to refinance or transfer it would trip the system. He also sent a cease and desist letter to the HOA, demanding they preserve all digital correspondence and security footage. Within 24 hours, Layla called me something she hadn't done in months. Her voice was sugar poured over acid. Daniel, really, lawyers freezing property records. This is bad optics for everyone. You should have just come to me first. I did, I said. You sent me a $15,000 fake bill and then sold my house. You're being dramatic, she said. If you want to settle quietly, I can, don't I? Interrupted. Everything you say is being documented. Silence. Then a click. That night, I drove to Steve's house. He'd finally returned from Denver, his face tight with guilt. I swear, man, I had no idea. The second I left, Layla started sniffing around. She told my wife you'd given her permission to stage the house for an appraisal. She lied, I said flatly. He handed me a USB stick. My wife's camera caught something. Layla and two guys moving boxes out of your house the week you were gone. The footage was grainy but damning. Layla in her pink blazer, directing two men to carry furniture into a white van. One clip showed her stepping into my living room, casually waving her phone like she was giving a tour. The timestamp matched the day she claimed the property inspection happened. Kevin nearly whistled when I showed him the next morning. This is gold. Combine this with the forged emails, the fake LLC, and we've got a pattern of conduct. He started contacting other residents. Within days, 2 more neighbors admitted Layla had helped them sell homes after back dues issues. One of them, an elderly widow, said she never saw a cent. Layla's been running a foreclosure racket, Kevin said grimly. She scares people into thinking they owe the HOA money, gets them to authorize her as a proxy, then forges the paperwork if they resist. Classic white-collar theft hidden behind legal procedures. I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. So she's been stealing people's houses legally. Temporarily legally, Kevin corrected. We're about to change that. By the end of the week, the county fraud unit had accepted Kevin's referral. An investigator named Ramirez met us in his cubicle, surrounded by files thicker than dictionaries. He looked at the evidence, then said quietly, "We've had 3 complaints about Willow Creek Estates in the last 2 years. Looks like yours might be the one that cracks it." When I left the office, I felt something shift. For the first time since landing from China, I wasn't just reacting, I was fighting back. Still that night, I couldn't shake the image of Layla smiling at me like nothing had happened. Her power came from that smile, that ability to make crime look like order, to make theft look like paperwork. So I did what any engineer would do when faced with chaos. I started building a system. I created folders, timelines, backups. I bought a new hard drive labeled Evidence. I wrote daily summaries. I printed duplicates and hid them at Steve's house, because I knew Layla would try to erase me again. And this time, she wasn't stealing just a house. She was stealing her last illusion of control. The following week became a blur of phone calls, document scans, and caffeine. Kevin Adams warned me that the process would be slow, painfully slow, but precision was our greatest weapon. Fraud is like a puzzle, he said, leaning over his desk one morning. You don't win by yelling first. You win by proving it one piece at a time. That's easier said than done when your entire life has been stolen. I was still living out of a duffel bag at the motel, brushing my teeth over a sink that barely drained. Meanwhile, the people who bought my house were hanging Christmas lights. I could see them on Google Street View updates, smiling with cocoa mugs in a home I paid for. Kevin filed our first motion, petition to invalidate deed and freeze escrow disbursements. The county court accepted it for review, but we had to prove two things. One, that the documents transferring my house were forged, and two, that Layla directly benefited from the sale. For the first point, Kevin brought in a handwriting expert, an older man named Dr. Porter. He examined my genuine signatures from tax filings, bank forms, and even an old birthday card I'd signed for my mother. Then he looked at the signature on the forged power of attorney. He adjusted his glasses, tapped his pen twice, and said, "This is an imitation. A clever one, but an imitation. See here, your natural stroke pressure fluctuates with rhythm. This one's consistent mechanical. Probably done with a stylus." Kevin smiled. "That's our first nail in her coffin." The second point, proving Layla profited, was trickier. We already suspected she funneled funds through her LLC Willow Realty. But suspicion wasn't evidence. We needed a paper trail. That's when Kevin discovered something explosive. While reviewing transaction logs from the escrow company, he found that $385,000 from the Thompsons' payment had been split into two wire transfers, $362,000 to Willow Realty LLC and $23,000 to Layla personally labeled commission. He printed it and placed it between us like a loaded weapon. There it is. Proof of self-dealing. She didn't just oversee the sale, she orchestrated it. That night I drove past the HOA office. It sat dark, empty, and self-important. A sign by the door read, "Community integrity starts here." The irony nearly made me laugh. I wondered how many lives that slogan had ruined. The next morning, Kevin and I met with Detective Ramirez again at the county fraud unit. He flipped through the new evidence, his brows tightening. "This is big," he said, "but I've seen HOA scams buried before." "They'll lawyer up hard, then we'll dig harder," Kevin replied. Ramirez smirked. "I like your lawyer." 2 days later, things got uglier. I received a letter taped to my motel door, a formal notice from the HOA declaring that I was temporarily suspended from community membership due to defamation and harassment of board officials. Layla had found a way to weaponize the bylaws against me. The document accused me of spreading false accusations, trespassing, and causing distress to residents. It was signed by 3 other board members, all Layla's loyalists. Kevin read it and chuckled darkly. This is what bullies do when they start losing control. They write new rules. Still, the damage wasn't just legal, it was social. Word spread through the neighborhood like a virus. Some neighbors sent me quiet texts of support, but others started parroting Layla's line, "Daniel's having a breakdown." One woman even posted on the HOA's private Facebook group that I was harassing the new family and spreading conspiracy theories. The isolation burned worse than the theft itself, Kevin noticed. "She's trying to break your credibility before the case breaks hers. Don't take the bait." But Layla wasn't done. 3 days later, my motel front desk called. "Mr. Wong, there's a woman here to see you." I froze. "Who?" She says she's from Willow Creek HOA. "Miss Lewis." My blood went cold. "Tell her I'm not here." But by the time I peeked through the blinds, she was already in the parking lot, standing next to her immaculate white Lexus SUV, sunglasses on, smiling directly at my window, like a predator that knew the glass couldn't stop her. Kevin called 5 minutes later. "She's testing boundaries. Do not engage. Let her hang herself with her own arrogance." And she did sooner than expected. 2 days later, Kevin received a voicemail from Layla, intended for her attorney but accidentally left on his number after a misdial. The message was short but incriminating. "Tell Travis to move the HOA files out of the office. The investigator might come by next week. We'll claim it was a mix-up with Daniel's authorization. I'll handle the rest." Kevin played it 3 times. Then he forwarded it to Detective Ramirez, who grinned like Christmas had come early. "That's obstruction," he said, "and intent." The next morning, we filed an emergency motion with the court to preserve HOA documents. The judge signed off. Deputies served the HOA office that afternoon, seizing computers and file boxes. By evening, Layla's mask began to crack. She called me again, this time furious. "You think you've won something. You're destroying this community with your lies," I said calmly. "You destroyed it the moment you sold my home. You'll regret this," she hissed. "You don't understand who I know." "I don't care who you know," I replied, "because I know the truth." Click. Silence. Kevin later told me, "She's cornered. When people like her lose control, they double down. Expect her to retaliate." He was right again. The next HOA newsletter, printed on glossy paper, with a smiling photo of Layla, contained a statement titled, "Clarifying Recent Misunderstandings." It painted me as an unstable former resident, attempting to exploit the HOA for personal gain. It even quoted an unnamed law enforcement source saying there was no evidence of wrongdoing. I nearly threw the newsletter across the motel room until Kevin smirked and said, "Perfect. That's defamation in print. She's giving us more ammo." Meanwhile, Detective Ramirez uncovered another connection. One of Layla's buyers from 2 years ago, an elderly widow named Margaret Hill, had also filed a complaint about a missing title transfer. She'd lost her home after a clerical issue Layla promised to fix. Kevin contacted her. Margaret's voice trembled when she learned my story. "I thought I was the only one," she whispered. She told me I signed the wrong document, then said it was too late. Her testimony became our smoking gun. Layla's clerical errors were a pattern stretching back years. But it wasn't just Layla who grew desperate, the Thompsons did too. Derek Thompson called me one night, his voice uneasy. "Look, man, we didn't know any of this. We paid cash. We have kids. We can't just move." "I don't blame you," I said, "but that house isn't hers to sell." "I get it," he sighed. "But if this goes south, we lose everything." "You understand what that means?" I do, I said quietly. "It means we both got conned." After that, the hostility faded. They started cooperating with the investigation, even forwarding Layla's text messages, which showed her instructing them not to speak to outsiders. By the end of the month, the puzzle was complete: forged power of attorney, falsified emails, misused notary shell LLC, and financial gain. Kevin leaned back in his chair one afternoon, eyes gleaming. "We're ready to move to the next phase: civil trial and criminal referral." She's toast. But before we could celebrate, an envelope arrived at his office, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 5 words scrawled in red ink: "Stop now or lose everything." Kevin held it up to the light, then looked at me. "She's panicking." "That's good. Panic makes mistakes." I exhaled slowly. For the first time, I wasn't scared, I was certain. Layla thought she could bully me into silence. But I wasn't the same man who'd once measured his lawn with a tape measure to appease her. She had turned this into a war. Now it was time to make it public. The next few weeks felt like standing in the eye of a slow-moving hurricane. Everything was eerily calm on the surface. No more calls, no new threats, no HOA newsletters filled with slander, but I could sense the chaos spinning just beyond reach. Layla Lewis wasn't the type to retreat quietly. She was regrouping, calculating her next strike. Kevin knew it too. "She's a narcissist," he said bluntly over coffee in his office. "People like her don't just want control, they need it. When you threaten that, they panic. And panic leads to sloppy mistakes. That's where we win." He was right. Layla's silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. To counter that, we decided to change the rules of engagement. Instead of fighting her directly through the court, we'd bait her into incriminating herself in her own words. Kevin said, "One afternoon we're going to play the fool." I frowned. "You want me to pretend to lose?" "Exactly. People like Layla only let their guard down when they think you've given up. You're going to write her an email, polite, regretful, defeated. You'll say the stress has taken too much out of you and you want to resolve this quietly. Offer to meet. Tell her you're willing to settle if she returns part of the proceeds." I hesitated. "She'll smell a trap." Kevin smirked. "Oh, she'll smell victory." So I did it. I spent hours crafting the perfect message, humble but believable. The kind of letter a broken man might write after being crushed by bureaucracy. "Dear Miss Lewis, I've had time to think about what's happened. I don't want to destroy the community or drag this through court anymore. If you're willing to discuss a quiet resolution, maybe returning a portion of the sale funds so I can move on, I'll consider it closed. I just want my peace back." Kevin approved it with minor edits. "Send it from your old HOA email address," he said. "Make it look sincere. Then wait." I waited 3 days. Nothing. Then on the 4th morning, my inbox pinged. Layla had replied, "Daniel, I'm glad you've come to your senses. I never meant for things to spiral this far. The sale was meant to help resolve your debt, not hurt you. I only stepped in because you were unreachable, and someone had to act in the HOA's best interest. Let's talk privately. I can wire you something small, call it goodwill if you agree to stop this nonsense." Kevin's grin was predatory. "We've got her." He leaned back in his chair, rereading the email aloud. "She admits the sale happened. She admits involvement. She calls it goodwill, that's acknowledgement of wrongdoing. She even implies motive to cover your debt. Perfect." We forwarded the message to Detective Ramirez, who nearly shouted through the phone. "That's a confession, folks." It's wrapped in polite HOA language, but it's still a confession. The DA's going to love this. But Kevin wasn't done yet. He wanted more. "We need to show this wasn't a one-time event," he said. "If she's done this before, the prosecution will have a pattern, and juries love patterns." So we started digging into Layla's past transactions. HOA records, county property archives, public realtor databases. What we found made my stomach twist. Over the past 7 years, Layla's LLC Willow Realty had been involved in 5 suspicious foreclosure assistance sales. Each case followed the same blueprint. The homeowner allegedly owed HOA dues. Layla assisted with a quick sale to recover community losses. The price was always below market. The owner either moved away or never came back to contest. It was a ghost trail of silent victims. One file in particular stood out: an elderly widow named Margaret Hill. Her house had sold 3 years earlier under eerily similar circumstances. We tracked her down through a nursing home directory in a nearby town. She was frail, but her voice was sharp when Kevin and I met her in the common room. "I remember that woman," she said, narrowing her eyes. "The pink blazer, always smiling. Said I owed the HOA $6,000 in unpaid assessments. I told her I'd already paid, but she said the records were lost. She offered to handle everything so I wouldn't get evicted." "Did you sign anything?" Kevin asked. "Yes, some form. Said it was a repayment agreement. Next thing I knew, my house was gone." Kevin exhaled slowly. "Mrs. Hill, would you be willing to make a statement to investigators?" The old woman hesitated, then nodded. "It's time someone stopped her." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing all the people Layla had probably crushed under her rules: fines, threats, forged papers, fake debts. The HOA wasn't about lawns or fences anymore. It was about power, and she'd turned it into her personal gold mine. Kevin called the next morning. The affidavits filed. Ramirez says it's enough to open a broader investigation. But be ready, she's going to lash out when she realizes the net's closing. He wasn't kidding. That afternoon, my phone exploded with calls from unknown numbers. HOA board members, reporters, even curious neighbors. Someone, probably Layla, had leaked my settlement email to the community, spinning it as proof that I was blackmailing her. The HOA Facebook page lit up with comments: "Daniel's trying to extort our president, and he's making it up for attention." Layla even posted publicly. Unfortunately, a former resident continues to harass and defame the HOA despite our efforts to resolve matters peacefully. Legal action is forthcoming. Kevin told me not to respond. She's hanging herself. Let her. But inside I was boiling. Every post felt like a punch I couldn't block. Then a new message appeared, this time from a hidden number. It was a video. I pressed play. The footage showed me standing outside my old house arguing with Layla weeks earlier, the day I'd confronted her by the sidewalk. The clip was edited, cut right after I shouted, "You forged my signature." It ended with her calm voice saying, "Please leave before I call the police." She'd turned her own security camera into propaganda. I sent it to Kevin immediately. He didn't even blink. "She just made another mistake. She distributed surveillance footage of you without consent. That's privacy violation, and it proves she's still tampering with evidence." He was right. Layla had no idea that every move she made was now feeding our case. The following morning, Ramirez called with the tone of someone who'd just opened Pandora's box. "Daniel, we ran Layla's financials. She's been moving HOA funds into personal accounts. Small amounts, but consistent. Thousands of dollars in administrative reimbursements." "Embezzlement?" I asked. "Yep. And combined with your case, we're looking at a full-blown fraud ring." I nearly dropped the phone. "So this isn't just about my house anymore," No, Ramirez said. "It's about everyone she's ever cheated." By the end of the week, the district attorney approved a formal criminal investigation. The HOA's accounts were frozen. The board members who had blindly supported Layla started to panic. Some even contacted Kevin privately, begging for immunity in exchange for testimony. The next HOA meeting was chaos. Layla arrived in her pink blazer, pretending nothing was wrong. Cameras flashed. Reporters had shown up after the investigation went public. Kevin and I sat quietly in the back row recording. Layla took the podium, voice trembling but defiant. "These baseless accusations are tearing apart our community. We will not be intimidated by false narratives." Kevin leaned over and whispered, "She's toast." Halfway through her speech, a deputy entered the room and handed her an official subpoena right there on stage. The crowd gasped. Her composure cracked for the first time. She stared at the paper, then at me. For a brief second, the mask slipped, and I saw pure, seething hatred. That's when I realized something terrifying: this wasn't over. For people like Layla, power wasn't just currency, it was oxygen, and we'd just started cutting off her air supply. But I also knew this for the first time: she was breathing my air. The air of someone who'd been pushed too far and finally learned how to fight back. The night after Layla was served the subpoena, I drove back to Willow Creek Estates and parked a block away from my old house. It was late, quiet, almost peaceful, but the air hummed with tension like the calm before a thunderstorm. From where I sat, I could see the faint outline of my porch, the one I'd sanded myself 2 summers ago, now decorated with Christmas lights that weren't mine. The Thompsons were inside. Their silhouettes flickered across the curtains as they watched TV, completely unaware that the ground beneath them was about to crack open. Kevin had warned me not to come back here. "It's emotional quicksand," he'd said. "Every time you drive by that house, you give Layla free rent in your head." But I couldn't help it. I needed to see what I was fighting for and what she had stolen. That night my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. When I answered, the line was silent for a moment, then a low voice said, "You think you've won. You've made enemies, Daniel. You should have stayed in China." Click. I froze. My heart hammered so hard I could hear it echo in my ears. I knew that voice. Travis Lewis, Layla's nephew, the buyer's agent. I called Kevin immediately. "She's starting the intimidation game," he said, his tone calm but cold. "Good. That means she's scared." "Scared people do stupid things," I said. "Exactly. Let's make sure she does." The next morning the storm began. When I opened my email, the HOA had issued a public statement. Headline: Community in Crisis HOA Board targeted by false allegations. The document was dripping with manipulation. It accused me of harassing board officials, of using doctored documents, and of partnering with a disgruntled attorney to destabilize neighborhood harmony. She even quoted an unnamed local investigator, who supposedly confirmed there was no credible evidence of fraud. Kevin later found out that investigator didn't exist. Layla had invented him. That same afternoon, local TV vans rolled into Willow Creek. Reporters wanted a statement, not from me, but from Layla. She didn't hide. She stood proudly on the HOA steps, camera-ready pink blazer, crisp sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. "This is a misunderstanding," she told them, smiling sweetly. "Mr. Wong is a troubled man. We've tried to help him, but he's chosen to attack the very community that supported him." I watched the broadcast from the motel room, jaw clenched. Her calm, calculated tone made me feel sick. Kevin, though, just smirked. Let her talk. The louder she gets, the deeper she digs. And dig she did. By the end of the week, she'd filed a counter-lawsuit accusing me of defamation, emotional distress, and loss of community reputation. She even demanded $250, 0 inches damages. Kevin laughed when he read it. "She's desperate. This isn't a legal move, it's theater." But the damage worked. Some people started believing her. I got hateful messages, even from former neighbors. "You're ruining the neighborhood. Why don't you move on? She's done so much for us." It was the classic Karen tactic twist: the truth, weaponize empathy, play the victim. Meanwhile, Layla's allies on the board held a special session. I wasn't invited, of course, but the minutes were public record. They voted to permanently terminate Daniel Wong's membership privileges and community access. They even banned me from walking my dog through the subdivision I had once helped maintain. Kevin was furious. "She's abusing HOA authority to punish you. That's retaliation. We'll use it." But I was tired, bone tired. My mother called from China one night, voice soft and worried. "Daniel, my son, why are you doing this to yourself? It's only a house." I swallowed hard. "It's not about the house anymore, Mom. It's about her thinking she can take it and get away with it." There was silence. Then she said, "Then finish it. But don't let hate live inside you too." That hit me, because by then I could feel it, the hate. It was subtle, creeping like mold. Layla wasn't just stealing my property. She was eating pieces of my peace, one headline at a time. Then one evening, Kevin called me with news that shifted everything. "The FBI's in." I sat upright. Wait, what? Ramirez escalated it. Because of the interstate wires and financial transfers, it's now federal. Wire fraud, mail fraud, real estate, conspiracy, the works. I exhaled. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Within days, things started moving fast. The FBI subpoenaed Layla's LLC accounts, HOA financials, and personal emails. 2 agents showed up at my motel to review evidence. They were polite but methodical, asking about every single message, every login record, every interaction with the HOA. Kevin met with them too. "This is bigger than we thought," he told me afterward. "She's not just defrauding you, she's been laundering HOA money for years." Meanwhile, whispers started spreading through the neighborhood. Residents began questioning where their HOA fees were going. A few even organized a private meeting without Layla. Someone leaked financial records showing huge consulting payments to unknown contractors, all tied to Willow Realty LLC. The cracks were spreading. Then came the night everything exploded. It was supposed to be an ordinary monthly HOA meeting, but this time nearly the entire neighborhood showed up, reporters too. Kevin and I arrived early, sitting quietly in the back row. Layla strutted in 15 minutes late, phone in hand, surrounded by 2 board members like bodyguards. She looked calm, but her eyes darted, scanning the crowd like she could feel the tide turning. She took the podium. Before we begin, I'd like to address the false rumors circulating about this board. But before she could finish, a voice from the crowd shouted, "Where's the money?" Layla murmurs rippled through the room. Another homeowner stood. "My HOA fees went up 30% last year. What did you do with them?" Layla banged her gavel. "Order, this is inappropriate." Then the back doors opened. 2 FBI agents entered, badges visible. The room went silent. Layla Lewis, one said. She froze. "You're under investigation for federal fraud and forgery. We have a warrant to seize all HOA records and electronic devices." The sound of cameras clicking filled the hall. Layla's face went pale, then red. "This is harassment," she screamed. "You have no right." Kevin leaned toward me and whispered, "Oh, they have every right." Layla tried to walk off the stage, but one agent stepped in front of her. Another read her rights aloud as the crowd whispered, gasped, filmed. The once powerful HOA queen was now trembling under fluorescent lights. I'll never forget the look she gave me when they cuffed her, pure disbelief. Like I'd broken a rule she thought only she could write. The next day, every news outlet ran the story: HOA president arrested for real estate fraud and embezzlement. Neighbors who once doubted me sent apology messages. Steve came by the motel with takeout and said, "You did it, man. You actually did it." But the strangest part, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. Because even after the FBI took her away, the damage lingered: months of stress, humiliation, and lost peace. Kevin noticed. "Justice doesn't erase pain," he said quietly. "But it stops the bleeding." I nodded. "Then I guess I'm ready to heal." He smiled. "Good. Because the next step is court." And somewhere in a cold holding cell, Layla Lewis was realizing the same thing I'd learned months ago. When you build power on lies, it only takes one truth to tear it all down. When the news broke, Willow Creek Estates imploded. The same neighbors who once whispered that I was unstable were now glued to their phones, devouring every headline. The HOA Facebook group, once a fortress of Layla's control, turned into an open war zone. Posts with her smiling face vanished overnight. People were suddenly shocked and heartbroken that someone they trusted could do something so vile. Kevin called it the flood phase. When the tide turns, everyone pretends they were never on her side, he said. Still, it was only the beginning. Arrest wasn't conviction. And if there's one thing I'd learned about Layla Lewis, it's that she didn't stay down for long. 2 days after the FBI raid, her attorney held a press conference outside the county courthouse. The man looked like a corporate shark in an expensive suit. Cameras flashed as he announced, "My client, Mrs. Lewis, denies all allegations and maintains her innocence. She is the victim of a smear campaign orchestrated by a disgruntled former resident with a personal vendetta." I watched it live on TV from Kevin's office. He muted the volume halfway through and sighed. "They're going to spin this as political HOA. Politics, jealousy, whatever sells. We'll stick to the evidence." He was right, because the evidence was a mountain and it was still growing. The FBI's forensic team had recovered deleted emails from Layla's HOA server, all routed through her Willow Realty LLC domain. They detailed everything: fake foreclosure notices, fraudulent signatures, internal instructions to her nephew Travis, and even payments labeled reimbursements to personal accounts. But the most damning piece came from Travis himself. Ramirez called us one morning with a tone that sounded like restrained triumph. Travis flipped, he said. "What do you mean?" I asked. "He's cooperating." Gave a full statement to federal prosecutors. Said Layla ran the operation, forged documents, bullied board members, and pocketed hundreds of thousands over the years. "He's got proof: text messages, emails, voice notes." Kevin nearly dropped his coffee. "You're kidding." "Nope, he wants a plea deal. And honestly, they'll give it to him. He's handing them the whole playbook." The playbook was worse than I imagined. Layla hadn't just stolen homes, she had built a network. Over 7 years, she'd orchestrated at least 5 fraudulent foreclosure auctions, each targeting homeowners who were elderly, traveling, or too timid to fight back. She'd use the HOA's authority to claim they were delinquent, file fake liens, forge powers of attorney, then sell the properties below market value to buyers connected to her nephew. The total take $1.8 million. When the FBI presented the findings to the district attorney, the case officially transformed from a local scandal into a federal fraud indictment. The trial date was set for late March. Those weeks leading up to court felt surreal. My days revolved around depositions, witness prep, and late-night strategy calls with Kevin. The prosecutors were confident, but they needed me not just as a victim, but as a narrator. Juries need a story, Kevin told me, and you're the guy who lived it. I practiced my testimony until I could say it without shaking. How Layla harassed me, how she fabricated debt, how she accessed my home while I was in China, how she sold it, forged my name, and laughed to my face. But the moment I walked into the courtroom for the first time, every ounce of calm evaporated. Layla sat at the defense table dressed in a gray suit instead of her usual pink. Her hair was neat, her posture perfect. She looked smaller somehow, but her eyes still carried that same quiet venom. When our eyes met, she didn't flinch. She smiled. That smile said, "You might have won the battle, but I'm not done." The prosecution opened strong. They laid out the timeline with surgical precision fake dues, forged POAs, falsified sales, and shell companies. They called former HOA board members who testified under oath that Layla pressured them to approve transactions without review. They called victims, including Mrs. Hill, who spoke trembling but fierce about being deceived. When it was my turn, Kevin squeezed my shoulder. "Just tell the truth. You've been doing that since day one." I walked to the stand. My palms were slick. I looked at the jury, 12 strangers holding the power to decide whether justice meant anything. Then I looked at Layla. She tilted her head slightly as if curious. I told them everything. About the fake debt, the missing furniture, the counterfeit emails. About calling the police and being told it was a civil matter. About sitting in that motel room, staring at my own deed, wondering how this could happen in a country that worships property rights. When I reached the part about my mother, how she called from China asking why I was fighting so hard for a house, my voice cracked. "It wasn't just a house," I said. "It was proof that people like her can't take what's yours just because they think they can." Kevin said later he saw a few jurors nod. Then it was Layla's turn to take the stand. She tried charm first. Spoke softly, smiled at the jury, portrayed herself as an overworked volunteer trying to keep the community afloat. Claimed she'd made administrative mistakes but never with intent to deceive. "I trusted the wrong people," she said, glancing subtly toward Travis. But the prosecution shredded her on cross-examination. They showed her own emails instructing Travis to use Daniel's template for the authorization letter. They played audio messages she'd sent to a board member, boasting about clearing deadweight homeowners. The final blow came when they displayed the financial transfers, every dollar traced from the buyers to her LLC to her personal checking account. Layla's composure cracked. Her voice rose, then broke. "Everyone does this. Every HOA president takes administrative fees." The courtroom went silent. The judge's gavel hit once. By the end of the day, it was over. The jury took less than 4 hours to return a verdict. Guilty on 23 counts, including wire, fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and embezzlement. Layla Lewis was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison plus $2.1 million in restitution to victims. When the judge read the sentence, she didn't cry. She didn't even look at me. But as the marshals led her away, she whispered something I'll never forget. "You think they'll thank you for this? Wait till you're in charge." At the time, I didn't understand what she meant. But 3 months later, I would. Because after Layla's conviction, Willow Creek Estates collapsed. The entire HOA board resigned, leaving the community leaderless. Residents panicked. No one knew who handled maintenance, repairs, or dues. Rumors spread that the neighborhood would dissolve entirely. That's when they came knocking. Daniel Steve said one evening, holding a petition with signatures from nearly 40 households, "We need someone honest to rebuild this place. Someone who actually cares." I laughed. "After everything you want me to run the HOA," Steve shrugged. "Who better to make sure it never becomes another Layla?" I stared at the paper for a long time, and that's when her words came back. "Wait till you're in charge." I smiled faintly. "All right," I said. "Let's do it. But we're rewriting every damn rule." It felt poetic. The same bylaws she once weaponized would now protect the people she'd exploited. The first thing I did as interim president was open the books. Every transaction became public record. Every meeting was live-streamed. The HOA's motto changed from "Community integrity starts here" to something simpler, more honest: "No secrets, no power trips." For the first time, Willow Creek felt like a community again, not a prison with landscaping fees. And for me, after months of fighting sleepless nights in courtrooms, I finally did the one thing Layla never could. I slept in peace. When the gavel came down and Layla's sentence was final, I thought that was the end. Justice as clean and sharp as a judge's words. But real life doesn't fade out to applause. It lingers messy, exhausting, and strangely quiet. For weeks afterward, I felt like I was floating through my own story in slow motion. Reporters stopped calling. The FBI packed up their files. Kevin moved on to another case. The Thompsons, the family who had unknowingly bought my home, came to see me one evening holding an envelope. Daniel Derrick said, his voice humble, "We got word from the DA's office. They're refunding what we paid from Layla's seized assets. We just wanted to thank you. We didn't know." I shook his hand. "You were victims too. I don't blame you." His wife Hannah smiled faintly. "We're moving out next month. Too many memories here." When they drove away, I stood in the driveway, my driveway, and stared at the house that had survived it all. The paint was chipped, the porch sagged a little, and my old tools were still missing. But it was mine again. Kevin met me there the following day holding a small envelope. "County clerk signed off," he said. "Title officially transferred back to you. Congratulations, homeowner." He grinned, but I could see the fatigue behind his eyes. Months of depositions, filings, and court appearances had drained us both. "Feels weird," I admitted. "Winning." He nodded. "It always does. Justice isn't supposed to feel good just right." He was right. That night I walked through each room slowly. The echo of my footsteps sounded foreign. In the living room there was still a faint outline where my old couch used to sit. I placed my hand on the wall, feeling the texture of the paint, and for the first time I didn't feel anger, just relief. The next morning a moving truck pulled up. Steve came over with coffee and 2 sets of gloves. "Ready to start over?" he asked. "Not start over," I said, smiling. "Just rebuild. We worked all day, new furniture, fresh paint. Even the grass outside, which Layla had fined me for being uneven, was now a wild, honest green." I left it that way deliberately, a small rebellion. By sunset, the neighborhood was quieter than it had ever been. The HOA board had dissolved after Layla's arrest, and most of her loyalists had either resigned or moved away. The ones who stayed avoided eye contact for months. But over time, something shifted. People began waving again. Kids played on the sidewalks. The fear that had hung over Willow Creek for years started to fade. Then one afternoon, Steve knocked on my door holding a clipboard. "You might want to see this," he said. It was a petition not from the HOA, but from the residents. 47 signatures. At the top in neat handwriting were the words, "Nominate Daniel Wong for HOA president." I stared at it, dumbfounded. "You're kidding," he grinned. "Nope, everyone agrees. We need someone who actually gives a damn about fairness." I laughed. "You realize how ironic that is, right? Me, the guy who spent a year fighting the HOA, becoming the president of one?" Steve shrugged. "Maybe that's exactly why you should." The next week, we held a small community meeting in the clubhouse, the same place where Layla once ruled with her clipboard and pink blazer. This time there were no microphones, no lecterns, no rehearsed speeches. Just folding chairs and neighbors. I stood at the front palm sweating. "Look," I began, "I never wanted this job. I still don't. But I do believe something HOAs don't have to be prisons. They can actually work for people if you stop treating power like a weapon." Someone clapped. Then another. By the end of the night, the vote was unanimous. I was officially the new president of Willow Creek Estates. My first act in office, I shredded half the bylaws. The absurd ones, the petty ones, everything Layla had used to control us. The approved color palette, gone. The grass-length compliance clause, deleted. The rule about mailbox symmetry, burned ceremoniously in a metal bucket behind the clubhouse, while Steve played classic rock through a Bluetooth speaker. We replaced them with one sentence printed in bold at the top of every new document. "This community exists to protect its residents, not punish them." That night, the air felt lighter. Neighbors lingered in the parking lot, laughing, talking. Someone brought cupcakes. It was the first time in years that Willow Creek didn't feel like a dictatorship wrapped in manicured lawns. A week later, I got a letter from Kevin. It was handwritten old-school lawyer style. "Daniel Most. Clients disappear after the trial. You didn't. You built something out of the ashes. That's rare. Keep it that way. And if your new HOA ever finds anyone for the wrong shade of beige, I'll personally come down there and sue you myself." Kevin the First laughed out loud reading it. A month later, the local newspaper published an article titled, "From Victim to Leaderman Rebuilds HOA After Massive Fraud Scandal." They asked for an interview. I agreed, but insisted they include one, quote, "the only one that mattered. The best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's proving you never needed their approval to win." When the story ran, I got dozens of messages from strangers, people all over the country dealing with power-hungry HOAs. Some told me about fake fines, forged liens, and harassment campaigns, eerily similar to what I'd lived through. They called me a hero, a whistleblower, even a survivor, but I didn't feel like any of those things. I felt human again. The last person I ever expected to hear from, though, was Layla herself. One afternoon, about a year after her sentencing, I received a letter postmarked from a federal correctional facility in Kansas. My first instinct was to tear it up, but curiosity won. Inside was a short, scrawled note, Daniel. They gave me 15 years. I'll serve less with good behavior. I won't ask for forgiveness, but I want you to know you were right. Power makes people forget who they are. I hope you never become like me. Layla, I sat in silence for a long time staring at the paper. There was no satisfaction in reading it, just a strange, heavy sadness for what she'd chosen to become and for how many lives she'd twisted along the way. That evening, I stood in my yard watching the sun dip behind the rooftops. The grass was long again, uneven, alive. For once, I didn't feel the urge to measure it. Steve wandered over, holding 2 beers. "You ever think about her?" he asked quietly. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Mostly when I walk by the HOA office," he nodded. "Still got that sign up," I grinned. "Yeah, but I added something new." At the entrance to Willow Creek, a small wooden board now hung under the main sign, "Home Sweet Home." No Karens allowed. It made people laugh every time they passed by. Some even took selfies with it. For me, it wasn't just a joke, it was a reminder that a neighborhood isn't defined by its rules, but by how it treats the people who live there. That justice can take months or years, but it will find its way through cracks in the perfect pavement. And that peace, real peace, doesn't come from punishment. It comes from knowing you stood your ground and didn't become the thing you fought against. As the porch light flickered on, I felt the weight of the past year lift from my chest. For the first time, in a long time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't scared. I was just home. If this story taught me anything, it's that power without accountability always rots. Whether it's an HOA president, a boss, or a neighbor who thinks the rules bend around them, corruption always hides behind politeness. Stand up for yourself even when it's lonely. Document everything. Trust the truth even when no one else does. Because one day when the dust settles and the liars are gone, you'll still be standing, tired, scarred, but free. So tell me, have you ever had your own HOA nightmare? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. There's always another Karen out there, and together we're going to keep exposing them.